everybody. Welcome to
Hi,
our first video of So Random and Weird. And I'm Sheena, today's host.
I'm Sarah.
And
Ugh.
today I am covering oddities and curiosities, was my
Mhm.
spin last week. So this is definitely going to be um, a little personal just because my life has been around so much death. And we'll say hello to Twinkles. Say hello.
A little guest
Next
star.
month next month, she'll be 18.
Oh my
So,
gosh. Spunky, our first cat, lived till 19. I think the vet said that in cat years, that was like 143 or something. And I was like,
yeah,
that that's phenomenal. That's pretty old for a cat.
yeah. My Dane
I
was
don't think I'd want to live to be 143. I've outlived everybody.
no, no,
But
my
like,
Dane was 19,
yeah.
and he's been
Well,
gone for almost a year now.
I Spunky was definitely I'm glad he was able to pass when he did. When he died, my dad was actually helping him to go to the bathroom.
Mm,
Like, he couldn't go, and the vet said, "He's not in pain. He's not in pain. He's not hurting." Um, and so he actually showed my dad how to, like, squeeze his
mhm,
bowels, like, his abdomen,
yeah, to
to
express them.
help express, yeah, and to get so that I can't imagine. My dad is not a big cat fan, but that he did that for Spunky, that he, you know I mean, I thought that was a really awesome thing for my dad to do. But
Yeah,
I am glad that, he had passed when he did, because I would not want anyone helping me to go to the bathroom. I already told my kids that if I'm, like, if I'm, like, in a diaper or bedpan, just end it all. I'm not a big fan of public bathrooming, going in
yeah,
front of people, having people see me, oh, yuck, yuck, yuck. Ah,
yeah.
anyway, I don't know how we got on
But
that topic. Never mind.
well, because today we are handling the uh, photography of the dead
I was hoping you were gonna do that.
because you know it is now in this day and age, it is very much like the old ones are oddities, and now it's a curiosity. So, um, I understand that this is like can be really touchy for people. So I just want to warn you now. We are going to be talking about death, and um, that's part of the reason why Twinkles is probably coming up here because she's my little nursemaid, and anytime I there's something sensitive, she has to be right by me. So I just want to give everybody that option that you guys don't have to listen. You don't have to, you guys can skip this one or save it for another time. Yeah. But for me, it's a sensitive topic, but at the same time, pretty much every year that my parents were married, somebody died. And that included two of my own siblings. So death is something that I am very comfortable around. It's not something that sometimes it takes the breath out of me, but very rarely does it. It's usually only when it's like the really sudden deaths, like my own father's death,
Yeah.
um,
The
because
unexpected, yeah.
that was, suicide. So, anyways, so we'll go ahead and we'll get started on this. So, and the thing is, too, is that this subject is quite deeply and profoundly human as well, is because it's something that we will all experience at one time or another. So I want you to imagine something. You're standing in an antique shop, one of those good ones, the kind that smells like old paper and cedar and mystery and not like must and like grandpa's moldy
Yeah,
old
the old smell.
cologne. Yeah, that nasty smell, you know,
Yeah.
and you pick up an old photograph. It's sepia toned, mounted on thick cardstock, a family portrait, a mother, father, two children, and then you look closer. One of the children isn't sitting up, they're propped up. Their eyes are closed, and there are flowers in their hand. That child is dead. And whoever these people were, whoever the family was, they dressed their child in their finest clothes, arranged them with care, and paid a photographer to come to their home so they could remember, so they could hold on to a face that was already leaving them. Today, like I said, we're talking about death photography, Victorian postmortem portraits, the cultural traditions around photographing the dead worldwide, and how the practice never really actually went away. It just changed because grief doesn't go away. The need to hold on doesn't go away. So let's get into it. So, first, let's define what we're talking about because death photography is actually kind of a big umbrella term. It can cover everything from, any photography that's taken of a deceased person, be that, within the tradition, postmortem, and as a keepsake. There's mourning photography, which includes photos of grieving families, funeral arrangements, and burial practices. And then there's what we might call documentation photography, which is your images taken for medical, legal, or journalistic purposes. And so we're going to focus mostly on the first two, the intimate, personal, grief driven practice of photographing the people you've lost, and to understand why this happens and why it makes it complete sense that we need to talk about context. Photography was invented in the late 1830s. The daguerreotype process was introduced publicly in 1839, and within years, portrait studios were popping up everywhere. For the first time in human history, ordinary people, not just the elite who could commission oil paintings, can have a likeness of someone they love. Now, here's where it gets important. In the mid 1800s, child mortality was devastating. We're talking roughly 40 to 50% of children in industrialized countries died before the age of 5. Diseases we now vaccinate against, scarlet fever, diphtheria, whooping cough, smallpox, and measles, were constant, merciless presences in life, everyday life. And so, not to mention also, children worked as well.
Well,
They were the
and that's
ones that got into
yeah,
the machines because they had
yeah.
little fingers.
They could crawl up on machines, they had the agility to be able to do that, so they were used to do that. They were used to do, the dangerous things, and they lost fingers and hands and limbs, extremities. I mean, you know, girls had to have their hair short because their hair would get stuck in the machinery, and it would pull their hair out and off their scalp and pull their scalp off. It was absolute this is why we have child labor laws. It was absolutely horrific what these industrialists were willing to do to children. And that's why people had a lot of children because of infant mortality rates. I mean, you know, there probably it was very rare to be in a family where you didn't lose a child, unfortunately. Even in
Right.
and a mother in childbirth. So, yeah.
Yes. And so for many families, the only photograph that is ever taken of a child was after their child died. Not because the parents were morbid, but because photography was expensive. Sessions required sitting still for extended periods, and you often didn't think to document someone until they were gone. Because if you ever see those old photos where there's just one person, and whether it's child or grown up, sitting and everybody else around them seems very fuzzy, that's why, is because the way the photos were able to be taken, you had to sit there for hours maybe. And so, of course, it makes sense that the person who passed is the only one that you're going to be able to see clearly in this photograph. Because if you look at the original, very first photo, you can see a blurry line of where
Yeah.
people would be walking,
Yeah.
but the
You
city itself, like the buildings stayed the
you
same.
you had to sit still for several minutes, and that was very hard for children. And they, photographer uh, being a war reenactor, there was a facility, there's a in Gettysburg at the time, and they did old-fashioned pictures, like, on the glass plates. Really neat, which is what they didn't have negatives back then. The pictures actually were taken on glass plates, so they were also very fragile, and glass was expensive too, so once again, why pictures were expensive. But anyway, so if you were standing, they actually brought in things, like, that went up behind you and, like, a grip that gripped you at your neck so that your neck didn't move. So you had to
Mhm.
stay in this position, um, which was interesting, I thought. Um,
Yeah.
but
Also,
yeah, it's
you wonder
uh,
why people don't smile in those photos. Imagine,
well, and also, I mean,
is it
it
done yet?
wasn't I mean, they some people did smile, but it wasn't pictures really weren't a vanity. It was more like, you know, it was more like it wasn't like a, "Oh, geez, smile," you know? It was more like a, this is a solemn, but I mean, not everyone. I mean, some people did smile, but it was also a very serious and solemn time, and that's why people were, like, you know, more serious faced.
So, we'll first start off with the Victorian mourning culture. So, to understand that Victorian death photography, you have to understand that Victorians were not shy about death the way that we are today. They were obsessed with it, but obsessed in a way that was organized, ritualized, and communal. Queen Victoria herself set the cultural tone. When Prince Albert died in 1861, she went into mourning so profound and so public that it lasted until her own death in 1901, 40 years later. She slept with a cast of his hand beside her bed. She had his clothes laid out every morning as if he still might dress the next day. She carried his photograph everywhere. Under Victoria's influence, mourning became a full cultural system with rules, rituals, and a robust economy around it. There was mourning jewelry, and there were mourning dress codes. Widows were expected to wear full black widow weeds for up to 2 years with specific fabrics, specific jewelry, and a gradual progression back towards color governed by elaborate social protocol. In fact, I remember where it's like in the last couple of months of your mourning, um, that you were finally able to wear like lilac purple.
Yeah, my friend, like I said, I was a Civil War reenactor, and my friend Mariana, she had beautiful outfits, and she had a 3rd year mourning dress, which was gray, but it also had a little bit of, like, golden color in there too, like, it was really neat. Um, it was just so beautiful, but yeah, widow's weeds. They women had to wear black the 1st year or 2, and then, like, the 3rd year mourning, they could go grays, and add a little bit of color, but mostly it was still gray, but yeah, it was fascinating.
Yep, and men
Men didn't
had
ha men
armbands.
Yeah, men had armbands, and I don't think they had to mourn as long. Women did. I don't remember men's, mourning ritual. I think they was, like, maybe a year, I think. I don't I don't know, but yeah, women was 3 years.
Yeah, and then there was also mourning cards, which is essentially a Victorian death announcement, often beautifully printed with black borders and the details of the deceased. Households hung black crepe on their doors to signal a death. Mirrors were covered, clocks were stopped at the moment of death, which is also a bit of a ritual for that part as well. So which is kind of interesting, bringing in an old tradition of covering the mirrors, stopping clocks. So in this culture of formalized public material grief, photography arrived. Of course, they photographed the dead. Of course, they did. Postmortem photography became so normalized that there were professional photographers who specialized in it. They advertised, they had rates. They would come to your home. The phrase commonly used in industry at the time was taken from life, a phrase that tells you everything about how they framed the work. It's not taken after death. It was taken from life, as if the photograph was catching something before it fully slipped away. The aesthetics of these images were intentional and carefully considered. Photographers and families worked together to present the deceased as peacefully asleep rather than dead. Children were often posed in their beds, surrounded by favorite toys or flowers. Adults might be seated in a chair, positioned at a table, even arranged outdoors in garden settings. Some of the most haunting images are the ones where the living are posed alongside the dead, parents holding the infants, siblings arranged around a brother or sister. When you looked at these photos, you could understand immediately that this was a family that was trying to hold themselves together around an absence that is already consuming them.
And sometimes and I'm sorry, you may say this, and I apologize if I ruin something, but what gets me is sometimes when the family members are being hidden
Mhm.
in the picture. You know,
Yes,
they're
okay.
being do you talk about that? I'm sorry, am I
No, no,
Oh,
no, you're fine.
um, what really gets me is, like, the parents will be holding the child, but they're covered with a blanket or,
Mhm,
a tablecloth or something to make it look like the child is sitting by themselves, um, which obviously is not true. They're being held up by their parent because they're deceased. The child is deceased. And that's I d to me, that's eerie. I mean, I just think I would rather have had a mother there holding her child than hiding and
mhm,
pretending the child is alive, but whatever. I mean, I guess I don't know what the reasoning was behind, like, certain, like, why we're doing this instead of this. If it was, parent preference, I don't know, but, yeah, those are weird pictures. I feel it's creepy in my mind.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I don't I would rather just be, like, with the flowers or in the garden,
Yeah, I mean, if
propped up
I
in a
mean
chair.
I don't understand, like, I mean, I guess maybe if they wanted a picture of what, "Hey, this is what my child looked like when they were alive," because they wanna remember the past. Okay, maybe I get that, I don't know, but I mean, mm, it's hiding the parent underneath a sheet or a blanket or a tablecloth, to pretend I mean, and obviously the parent's there, I mean,
Mhm,
you notice the bulge of the parent, of the shape. Um, I mean, and they did well with hiding I mean, they did well with hiding it, but you can still tell. But yeah, it's odd, odd. But there's also I what another thing that freaked me out was I saw a death picture of a family, mother, father, and 2 children, I think, 2 or 3 children, I think. Um, it was a murder-suicide, and I think the wife I forget if it was the husband or the wife that killed the spouse and the children and then themselves. I think it was 'cause I remember I think it was the wife that actually killed everyone else and then killed herself. I remember that they were talking about having to, like, hide her head because of where she was shot in the head.
mhm,
It was very but I mean, they were all together in one casket, and I'm thinking, would the other spouse really have wanted to be buried with someone who had killed them and their children?
yeah,
I mean, if my husband decided to, pop me off and my children, and then himself, I'm sorry, I really don't wanna be buried with him, you know? Taking my life and my children's life is heinous and, cowardly,
yeah, yeah,
I'm
and I didn't mean to laugh, but there is a family photo that is of me, my mom, and my dad, and I was very young, and my mom was pregnant. I know it was either Stephanie or my brother Jason, that she was pregnant with. So, you know, because it was only me who was in the photo, and the way that this photo looks, I'll have to find it and send it to you. But, I mean, everybody just looks like
that
it's like this
Oh god.
Well, not just that, but just, like, if that was the family photo that they put in the newspaper of, like, the, family
Yeah,
homicide,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, that would be it because everybody's just like,
I'm sorry.
"I
That's
know, that's the."
we're not laughing at death, we're not laughing at death, we really aren't.
No.
We really aren't. But, yeah, no, there have been some pictures I found of living people that look like they would rather be anywhere else.
Yeah, but I mean, you saw that photo and it said family murdered, and husband, family side all happened and, or,
God,
you know, murder suicide when the child was found underneath the table, that kind of thing.
yeah.
That's
Oh my
you would
gosh.
go, "Oh, yeah, 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 that's."
I can see that, yeah, I can believe that would happen with those people. Oh, you gotta show me that picture. You've gotta show
I
me that
will.
picture.
I'll
Gotta
have to
see it.
find it.
I've gotta see it. Oh god. Well, just to see your mom and dad, younger again from, when I knew them, like
Well, this is before you knew them.
well, yeah, but I mean, it probably wasn't that long before. Oh, so I mean, they were probably
Yeah,
still
within about 2, 3 years.
recognizable, so I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
So, we'll get back now on track.
I know, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I just
I
keep thinking
digress
about
so
that
much.
photo.
It's squirrel. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Right. So, one detail that often surprises people is the eyes. There is a persistent myth that Victorian photographers would paint eyes onto the photographs of the deceased to make them look more lifelike. This is partially true. Some photographers did add painted eyes on them to look more lifelike um, in post processing, particularly on I hate this word, daguerreotypes and early prints. But many post-mortem photographs show subjects with closed eyes, which was also considered more appropriate. Peaceful, like sleep. The open eyes technique was more common with very young children, where parents desperately wanted a sense that this was what the child looked like while it was alive. So then we'll go ahead and we'll skip forward for a bit. So let's go into the actual mechanics of how these photographs were made because it's both more technically interesting and emotionally complicated than you might expect. So, as we said before, these early photographs required long exposure times. Um, they had to sit completely still from anywhere from a few seconds to several minutes. Living subjects used the metal neck braces and chair supports to help them hold positions. The deceased obviously did not have this problem. In some ways, they were the ideal photographic subjects for the technology at the time.
Sad to say,
Photographers
yeah.
developed specific techniques for the work. Bodies were sometimes propped up or supported with wire stands, a detail that occasionally becomes visible in photographs and which modern viewers sometimes find disturbing, but in which was simply practical at that time. The goal was always dignified, natural looking positioning. There was also significant artistry involved in the staging. Flowers were enormous. White flowers, especially particularly white roses and lilies, carried heavy symbolic weight in Victorian mourning culture. Garlands, wreaths, and single blooms placed in hands or on chests appeared constantly in those postmortem images. White symbolized purity and was especially associated with children and young unmarried women.
Yep,
Clothing was very carefully selected. This was a formal portrait, which means your best clothing. So whether it be a christening gown for the infants, they are infinite infants. Dress clothes for children, which you know, depending on when these photos were taken, they all were in dresses, boys and girls.
exactly. So boys wore dresses until they were potty
Yep.
trained. So,
FDR wore dresses as a
really?
child. So, yeah. because there would
Yeah,
be
Tyrion was, like, horrified when, he found out that he was wearing a dress, when I took him out for his first reenactment. He was horrified. He's like, "What? I wore a dress?" I'm like, "Yeah, you were a baby. You were a little less than a year old, and, yeah, you wore a dress. You'd wear a dress
it's
until
what
you
you
were
would have
potty
wore.
trained." Yeah,
Potty trained
so
or something called breeching, which is when they started wearing breeches. Breeches,
mhm.
breeches,
Riches.
breeches.
Yeah,
And
so
so and of course, formal wear for the adults. There's something about seeing a toddler in a perfectly pressed white dress with a flower crown, clearly gone, clearly beloved and cared for, that breaks something open in you, like me.
well, I mean, and these pictures also told stories, I mean, they told stories about, who the people were, so, I mean, that's why, they wanted to put their best face forward. They wanted to
Mhm,
make a good impression. They wanted to, present their best side.
mhm. Yep. And so then these photographs were then displayed in the home, framed on mantels, placed in memorial albums, carried in lockets. They were shared with extended family members who hadn't been able to attend the funeral. They were passed down through generations as a way of saying that this person existed, this person was ours, this person mattered in our family, which is something that's really quite fascinating. I mean, my mom has photos, but I mean, they were like at earliest 1880s that we have. I don't know who those people are. I know they're on my mom's side of the family, but who? No clue. None whatsoever. But that's them. They were there. They were in formal wear. These weren't all just, we're at the picnic and, you know, your third birthday or anything like that. Or as there's quite a few pictures of me running around naked as a baby because I would always just strip down and run. Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Sorry about that.
There we go.
Didn't wanna interrupt you. I tried to not interrupt you before, so I was like, but, my mom was a stripper. No, not really, but, like, as a child, she was. But, yeah, no,
Yeah, and so one fascinating subcategory within postmortem photography is the daguerreotype case portrait. It's a small hinged case that contained a single photo meant to be held in the hand or carried in a pocket. So that couldn't have probably this big. These intimate objects were sometimes made as a matching pair, one photograph of the living person, one taken after death, displayed side by side. The contrast was intentional. It was a way of showing the fullness of life, not just the end, which that's pretty nice. Yeah. So as I did all the notes on this and I've already read through my script and I'm like, oh wait, hold on, let's think about that. ADHD, let me tell you.
ADHD, yep, yep, squirrel.
As photography technology improved through the late 19th century, faster exposures, cheaper processes, more accessible equipment, postmortem photography became something families could do themselves rather than hiring professionals. Kodak's introduction of the Brownie camera in the 1900s put photography in the hands of ordinary people, and with it came a shift toward more formal, intimate death photography, less formal portraits, more private memorial. So then we'll go on about death photography around the world now because, the empire spread around, obviously. So a lot of technology got spread around through the empires.
Mhm,
So, and it's something that we also forget is that it wasn't just Victorian death photography. This was not just Victorian or Western practice. Photographing the dead is something humans have done across cultures and across the world and traditions as they vary. So we have Mexico and Dia de los Muertos. Muertos. Muerte. Bleh.
muerte. Yeah, yeah,
Muertes. There
I
you go.
love that,
In
Day
Me-
of the Dead. Mm,
I do. I do
yeah.
too. So, in Mexican culture, photographs of the deceased are central to the Dia de los Muertos tradition. Ofrendas, the altars built in honor of the dead, were built around photographs. The photograph is how the spirit knows it is remembered, knows it is welcome. In this context, photography of the dead isn't about capturing the moment of death, it's about maintaining ongoing relationships. The dead are not gone, they are elsewhere, and the photograph is the door. Shout out to Coco.
Yes, my kids love that movie. Kids love that movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of my favorite Disney movies. I mean, I gotta say, Emperor's New Groove is my ultimate favorite.
I've never seen that one.
But oh, you must. You must.
Okay.
I even watched it because it came out while we were just in college. So, I mean, to say that I like that, yeah, I was already 18 when that came out. So,
Yeah. I mean, I will fully admit, I mean, I still will watch certain cartoons, I'm emphasizing certain, um, at some years of age. So, yeah, I mean, just good childhood memories, good childhood memories. You're never too old to enjoy Disney movies or, Saturday morning cartoons. Oh my god, I miss Saturday morning cartoons in the '80s. Woo! Sorry.
so we'll jump back in and we're going to go to the Philippines. So, in the Philippines, there is a particular ritual that's done in rural and provincial communities, and it remains a common practice to photograph the deceased at wakes, which can last multiple days. They're not hidden or shameful photographs. They are shared openly and part of the community gathering of grief. Some families commission formal post-mortem portraits even today. The dead are displayed openly. Visitors come to pay respects over several days, and photography is part of the communal witnessing. Now we're gonna go next to Madagascar. I know, that song just came into your head. You don't give in, don't give in.
I know, I know. I won't. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So, this might be the most dramatic example of all. The Morena and Betsilio peoples of Madagascar practice a ritual called, and I'm sorry, Famadihana, which translates into the turning of the bones. Every 5 to 7 years, families exhume the remains of their ancestors, rewrap them in fresh burial shrouds, dance with the bones, share news and updates with the deceased, and then they reinter them. It is a joyful communal celebration, and yes, people take photographs. They dance holding the remains of their grandparents. They introduce the bones to new family members who have been born since the last ceremony. The photographs document a living, ongoing relationship with the dead. And then in Indonesia, the Tohora or Toraja people of Sulawesi, Indonesia, have a funeral practice that can last for weeks and even months, partly because of the elaborate ceremonies that they require significant resources and time to prepare. So during this period, the deceased is kept in the family home, treated rather as they're ill than dead. They're fed symbolically, spoken to, and included in family life. When photography became available, it became part of this ritual. The Turaja also carve wooden effigies that are called tau tau, which stand in cliff face tombs as permanent representatives of the dead. Photographs serve as a similar function, a way of keeping that person present. And then last, we have Japan. Japan has a complex and word, nuanced relationship with postmortem photography. Formal portraits of the deceased have been part of Japanese funeral practices. The large framed portrait photograph displayed in the altar during a funeral is called a iha photograph and is kept in the home afterward as part of an ongoing ancestor veneration. Japan also has its own specific aesthetic traditions around the photographing of the dead. that are distinct from Western postmortem portraiture. And the through line of all of these traditions, Victorian England, rural Mexico, Highland Madagascar, Highland Sulawesi, and Japan, is that photography becomes a technology of grief and love. Wherever humans have gotten their hands on cameras, they have used them to hold on to the dead. And so now I want to go over a bit about modern death photography. For me, that's pretty much the only
Wait,
photos I
there's
have of death.
modern death photography? Like, people are still
Mhm,
doing this?
mhm.
Oh, okay.
And for me, I have more pictures of my own brothers at especially Lauren's funeral than I do of him being alive, and the ones that we have of him being alive are in the hospital.
Well, I mean, I have one death photograph. It's of my grandma, my mom's mom, and that was because she died right before I was going out to California on a trip. Um, and I wasn't able to make her funeral. My mom said she would wanted you to go on this trip. You're going on this trip. So I went and I missed my grandma's funeral. So my mom or my dad, I guess my dad maybe took pictures of my grandmother in her casket before the people came in to visit and said their goodbyes. So I mean, I have one death photograph, but that's just because I wasn't able to be there. Um, but that's interesting that they're um, modern day death photographs. Continue.
Yeah, yeah. So it didn't, as we're talking about it, it didn't die out. But in this 20th century, with the medicalization of death and the cultural squeamishness around mortality now, um, it never ended. What happened instead is that it went underground for a while in Western cultures, particularly in the US, where the post World War II era brought a very specific cultural norm around protecting people from the reality of death, moving the dying to hospitals, closing the caskets, not talking about it. Death became medicalized and privatized, and photography of the dead became something that felt wrong, shameful, or transgressive. But grief doesn't go away just because we stop talking about it. In the 1980s and 90s, the quiet movement began among parents who experienced pregnancy loss and infant death. These parents, who were often told to move on, to not dwell, that they would have other children, were finding that the absence of any tangible record of their baby's existence made grief harder, not easier. Nothing to hold, nothing to show, as if the baby had never existed at all. In 2001, photographer Sandy Puck, PUC, founded Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep, a nonprofit organization that provides free professional photography to parents of terminally ill newborns and infants, stillbirths, and premature births. The photographs are not lurid or clinical, they are tender. They show tiny hands, they show parents holding their babies.
I I I do know about that. Um, for infants who have passed, who yeah, who yeah, that's like their only photograph is, um, yeah, after they've yeah, because they were born maybe stillborn or,
Mhm.
um, so I do know of that photography.
Yeah, and so the testimonials from parents who have used NILMDTS are extraordinary. These photographs become the only photographs that exist. They become the central object of grief, something to return to, something to show siblings years later, which that's what I have. See, I told you it got personal. Um, So, with Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep has now over 50,000 volunteer photographers in more than 50 countries. So the demand for this has only grown. There is also a broader modern movement around what is sometimes called natural death care. or death positivity, a cultural pushback against the medicalization and hiding of death. Organizations like the Order of the Good Death, founded by a mortician and author Caitlin Doughty, advocate for more open, honest, family centered engagement with death and the dying process. Photo- Photographing the dying and the dead is part of this conversation. Hospice photography is also a growing field. Photographers who work with families during end of life care, documenting not the death itself, but the final weeks and days of the family gathered, those small moments, and they are understood to be profoundly therapeutic for families in grief. And then there's the internet, which has changed everything. Social media has created entirely new forms of death documentation. The obituary post, the memorial page, the Instagram account maintained in someone's memory after they're gone. We photograph the dead at funerals and post photos. We share the last photographs taken of someone before they died. Some of this is controversial, some of it is complicated, but all of it's continuous with the practice as old as photography itself.
I'm
So,
I'm not judging people who choose to do that. For someone who's lived a long life, I'm not judging the whole death photography thing, but I
mhm,
don't know if I really understand it because you already know they're dead. You know they're dying. I mean,
mhm,
I wouldn't want to memorialize their dying in my mind. Like my grandfather had liver cancer. He had non-alcoholic cirrhosis of the liver. When he died, he was so gaunt and skeletal,
mhm.
and he did not look like himself. He had a bloated belly. Obviously, he had yellowish skin. He was skeletal. And I don't want to remember him like that. I don't. I mean, he was in pain. So I remember he snapped at me, and my mom explained to me, Sarah, this is not your grandpa. He's in pain. That's not him anymore. I wouldn't want to remember that. I wouldn't want to memorialize that. I want to remember him as he is, as he was, healthy and fun and caring and loving. And, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure if that's
Well,
for
I mean,
me.
yeah, it really just depends because there could have been a small moment that you may have missed, and that you could wish that you had something other than
I
your own
mean,
memory.
I have recordings of him, of his voice, and that's what I want. Like, I wanted recordings of my grandparents because I don't remember what they sound like anymore. My dad, when he interviewed my grandpa about his experiences in World War II, he recorded those interviews. So, I think he has them yet, but he I can go back and I can listen to my grandpa talk, and it's nice to have. And now, of course, now in the days of, cell phones, I mean, you can record your parents and that's great because I have recordings of, my father-in-law now before he passed, and I have recordings of my mother-in-law, and I have my parents, so we can go back and we can play those. And that's what I want to remember. Not, not them lying and, laying in bed dying. That's morbid in my mind. Like that's like I mean that's the only way that that people back then could really memorialize their loved ones because they didn't have the ability to just do it whenever they wanted to, like we do today.
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't really get the whole death photography thing nowadays for someone who's lived their life where you have photographs and videos and things like that.
Yeah, well, it just depends on each person, you know,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
the thing is that photography has always been an argument against forgetting. So when you photograph someone you love, you are fighting time. And so with that, I want to encourage everybody to let people take their photo
yeah.
because
video so people can hear you so that you can play,
Mhm.
that video can be played back, because you after a person is gone for so long, you will forget what they sound like.
And you're
You'll
not gonna
forget.
care that how fat you looked in that photo.
Yeah. Yeah, or if, you didn't have makeup on or you didn't have, you ever had a bad hair day or whatever. But, looking back and being able to hear that person you loved, and that's what I want, like, honestly, that's what I wish I had most right now with my grandparents because I lost my grandparents at a young age. I wish I could hear them again.
Yeah, so that's my call out when on based on this, because we now photograph more than our parents did and their parents did,
Yeah.
and their parents
Selfies.
did.
I mean, Tyrion's always like, TikToking himself, for the camera, he's always like I'm like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I got rude." I'm like, "What? What is no, what?" And he's making TikToks and he's making, to music and he's, using CapCut to put his videos together and stuff. So he's doing that all the time, so much more than we did, when we were younger
Well, yeah.
and
But
cell
then
phones
again,
hadn't,
we didn't have it
came
in our
out.
yeah, but it was a brick when we had cell phones. Then I was in college when I got my first cell phone.
I had a Nokia. I think that was my
Yeah,
very first Nokia.
the Nokia brick.
A flip phone. I was like, "Oh, yeah, I'm cool."
I didn't even have a flip phone. I had the brick. I dropped a whole
Oh
big
my
15-ounce can of, like,
god.
something on it. That sucker still worked. The only thing is, like, it had, like, a little scratch, a little
I had a
crack
BlackBerry
through it.
for, like, a minute. I don't even know what happened to that stupid thing, but I remember my very first phone was a Nokia, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, I'm cool." I got ringtones, pictures, I could make, like, certain people have certain ringtones.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
crazy.
but I mean, and now everyone has, like, either a Droid or an Apple or, so they have usually some kinda smartphone unless you're like my mom, um, who refuses she has a flip phone in her purse that she never uses because it's for emergencies only. So, while I have her cell phone number in my phone, I'd never call it. She never drives. She always drives with my dad, so I call my dad. That's how because her phone won't be on anyway. But no, it's that is but I mean, pictures and, it can also be a double-edged sword, taking, all those pictures and stuff too because, you know, you have social media now, and those pictures can be uploaded on the social media, and, that can be troublesome, that can be, like, my son Tyrion, he does not like when people take his pictures and just upload them to social media without his permission, without his consent. He wants to make sure he looks good. He wants to make sure that he's given permission. So I mean, I feel for these kids nowadays because we didn't have to worry about that growing up. We got the cell phones and the things to be able to take pictures of our friends at a younger age, but we didn't have to worry about certain pictures being spread all over the internet. You know,
Kind of. We
so
did
yeah.
have MySpace.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, it still wasn't like, like what it is nowadays, on
Yeah.
but
Yeah, definitely not
yes,
what it was before,
pictures
but
memorialize, pictures, videos,
mhm,
um, they memorialize and they're forever, especially now with the cloud and everything like that. And,
mhm.
you don't have to worry about negatives. Oh God, negatives.
Yeah. So, crazy and true, and I think our wheel is broken because it keeps landing on the same thing. Keeps giving me oddities and curiosities. I'm like, "Excuse me, I know I'm the, uh, the weird girl, but I just did that."
It gave you that again, the wheel? Seriously?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, finally, it gave me true crime.
Okay. Okay. That's funny. Oh my gosh. That is funny.
Yeah. So,
Well, I
oh,
mean, that is a topic that you, oddities is a topic that you really love. So, maybe the wheel senses that. Maybe the wheel's like, "Gina really likes this stuff. I'm gonna give it to her again." And it's like, you know what? Variety is the spice of life, you know? So,
yes. And we don't, unless you guys want us to sit over here and do another episode, you gotta let us know because, there are some times where we could do multiple parts. Like if I have a true crime episode, instead of having to jam it all into one episode, I could
mhm.
do two. It's something you guys got to let me know. Which is kind of funny. You can see my Scandinavian coming through, how warm I am
That
through
happens to
this.
me too. Like, whether I'm hot, whether I'm embarrassed, whether I've been drinking, it's all in my cheeks. You see it very easily in my cheeks. It just poof with red, poof, and then they get warm, and it's like, "Oh, I hate it. I hate
Yep.
it."
Yep. This is my Scandinavian coming through, my Norwegian. So yeah, that was our episode today. Something that I do have pictures of family because a lot of them either died when I was a baby or, that's, like my brothers. I mean, I lost 2 brothers before the age of 10. So, am I glad that we have those pictures? Yes.
I forget about Jason.
Well, Jason was when I was 3. So,
Yeah, I mean, because I
and
didn't know you
the on
then. Lauren, I do remember. I mean, obviously, I mean, so, I mean, that one touched me because obviously I knew you, but, I keep forgetting about Jason.
yeah, that's the only thing people are like, "Oh," because, like, I still have Morning Bear, my bear from Lorne. Um, but yeah, the only real photos I've seen are really blurry photos of Jason, and he was only alive for 20 days. So, I mean, obviously, I don't remember it, but I know that it affected me as a kid.
Do you
So,
think that it was because of your dad and where he was stationed, and do you think that
it had nothing to do
that
with my dad being stationed.
I mean, like, I
My
know you had
dad
talked about, like,
he was a Marine. He, um do you mean, like, the reason why all of us have such problems?
I mean,
Like, health problems?
Steph and your brothers, I mean, you're like, how do I say this nicely?
I'm the most
The
normal one out
more
of
normal
everybody.
of the 4 of you were, yes, you are. But I know you had talked about it before that, your dad was, it wasn't Agent Orange. What was it? It was he was stationed
He was
somewhere that,
the Camp Lejeune. They had the radioactive water. He was scheduled there, from 79 or not well, he was in the Marines, I think, from, like, wanna say, like, 78 to 84, somewhere along those lines. I don't between that time, during the time that they had radioactive water
the radioactive
at Camp
water.
Lejeune. Mhm.
Yeah. I know you had talked about that, I think, in an earlier podcast, um, that you wondered if that could have been some kind of base reason why things happened. Um, I don't know what happened with Jason, and I barely remember what happened with Lauren. I just remembered you died very, very young.
Yeah, 2 weeks before my 9th birthday. Yeah, um, Jason had his he had spina bifida and also his brainstem didn't develop. So, and my mom knew before, and they did give her the option to terminate the pregnancy, but my mom chose not to. And then there's my sister who has spina bifida and then a whole lot of other issues like Lennox-Gastaut syndrome and from an injury at a young age. a head injury, and um, mentally she's about 13. So, and she's 30. How old is how old am I?
Yeah.
I'm 42. So she's
Yeah.
37, going on
Yeah.
38.
Yeah.
And then Lorne, he had a rare brain tumor that, and I don't remember the name of it, um, but he had, it was one of the ones where it's very unlikely that they'll outlive toddler. Like, it's usually diagnosed in infants and toddlers, and they don't live beyond being a toddler, at least at that time. I don't know what kind it was, what kind of tumor it
He
was.
didn't live past being an infant, did he?
No, he was, he died October 24th, 1992, and he was born December 31st, 1991. So he died 2 weeks before my ninth birthday, which is supposed to be your golden birthday.
Your golden birthday? I never heard of that.
Yeah. I don't know what's supposed to be so golden about it because, well,
Yeah. Is it because it's your last year of single digits?
no, your golden birthday is the age that you turn the same day as your birthday. So, like, yours was when you were 28.
Okay. Okay. Because yours is the ninth of. Okay. That doesn't make sense either, though.
I don't know. Anybody can fill us in on that. Um,
Yeah, I'll have to
I
look it
don't
up and see what golden birthdays are. That's interesting.
yeah, and so has nothing to do with golden showers, I promise.
Oh god. Oh god. No, golden showers. That's totally different subject. Totally different subject. Oh god. Oh, no, 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 no. Totally
Uh,
different.
so, um, before we end here, if this episode moved you or if you have a family story that's connected to death photography, we would generally love to hear it. You can reach out to us through email, Instagram. Also, we're on Threads. So you know where to find us. We have a Facebook page, and you can email us, which is so random and weird pod at gmail.com. And as always, if you are enjoying us as well, please leave a review, share an episode with somebody who would appreciate, and subscribe so you don't
Spread the
miss our
word.
next
Word
episodes.
about.
Um, and we will see you in the weird places.
I love it.
Love you guys.
Love you guys. Thanks so much for joining us. Bye.
Bye.